hours when he gave up his seat. Not because he was noble, not because anyone was watching, but because the woman looked like she might fall apart if she didn't sit down. The departure gate at O'Hare buzzed with the restless energy of delayed flights and tired travelers. Outside the wide glass windows, Chicago's March wind dragged sheets of rain across the runway. Inside, every seat was taken. Ethan Cole stood near the charging station, one hand gripping a diaper bag that had seen better days, the other gently rocking his daughter against his shoulder. Lily was 3, small, warm, trusting. She'd finally fallen asleep after a long night in the emergency room. The fever had broken. The doctor had smiled. "She's going to be just fine." Ethan had nodded like that was enough. He'd spent his last $240 on that visit. His job interview in Seattle was in 12 hours, and he had exactly $43 left in his checking account. He shifted his weight as Lily stirred, her curls brushing his jaw. The gate agent announced another delay. Groans rippled through the crowd. That's when he saw her. She was older, late 60s, maybe early 70s, elegantly dressed but pale, her breathing uneven. She clutched her purse with trembling hands, scanning the room for an empty seat that didn't exist. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. His back ached. His legs felt like concrete. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. But he knew that look. It was the look of someone trying very hard not to be a burden. He stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said softly, "please take my seat." She blinked up at him. "Oh no, you have a child." "It's okay," he insisted, already lifting Lily more securely against his chest. "She sleeps better like this anyway." It was a lie. His arms were numb. The woman studied him for a second, really studied him, then sat down slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan nodded and stepped back, adjusting the diaper bag strap, digging into his shoulder. He didn't notice the man across the gate watching. The man in the tailored navy coat who hadn't looked up from his phone in 20 minutes. The man who owned half the companies on the financial news scrolling silently across the TV mounted above them. Richard Langford had built his fortune on instincts. He trusted patterns, numbers, leverage. He did not, as a rule, believe in chance. But he believed in watching people, and he had just watched something rare. No cameras. No applause. No hesitation. Just a tired father choosing someone else's comfort over his own. Richard glanced at the woman Ethan had helped. His mother. She had insisted on flying commercial for this trip. "I want to feel like a normal person again," she'd said. Richard had agreed reluctantly. Now he watched her lean back, relief softening her face. He watched Ethan sway gently, whispering something into his daughter's hair. He watched the way no one else noticed. Interesting, Richard thought. Boarding finally began 40 minutes later. By some twist of airline fate, Ethan's seat assignment had been separated from the one next to Lily's car seat. He'd tried to fix it at the counter. "We're completely full, sir," the agent had said. "I'm sorry." So he boarded last, balancing Lily, the diaper bag, and a folded stroller. When he reached his row, his stomach dropped. Middle seat, between two broad-shouldered men already jockeying for armrest territory. He swallowed and smiled politely. "Excuse me." He buckled Lily into her car seat by the window, then squeezed himself into the middle. She whimpered, half awake. "It's okay, baby," he murmured. A voice from the aisle interrupted. "Sir." Ethan looked up. It was the older woman from the gate. Behind her stood a flight attendant. "This passenger has offered to switch seats," the attendant said gently. Ethan blinked. "Ma'am, you don't have to—" "I insist," she replied. Her new seat was first class, and the one beside her was empty. Ethan froze. "That's too much. I couldn't possibly—" "You gave me your seat when you needed it more," she said. "Please allow me to return the kindness." The two men beside him were already unbuckling his seatbelt. Within minutes, Ethan found himself settling. Lily into a wide leather seat he'd only ever seen in advertisements. She looked impossibly small in it. He looked stunned. Across the aisle, a tall man in a navy coat watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. Richard Langford extended a hand. "Richard?" Ethan adjusted Lily's blanket. "Ethan, thank you. For this, I didn't expect—" "Most people don't," Richard said. There was no arrogance in his tone. "Just curiosity." "Business trip?" Richard asked. "Job interview," Ethan admitted. If they still want me after I explain the whole single dad situation. Richard raised an eyebrow. You think being a single father is a liability? In tech? Ethan gave a short laugh. Sometimes. What do you do? Software engineering. Infrastructure optimization. Mostly contract work lately. Richard's gaze sharpened almost imperceptibly. Contract work, he repeated. The conversation drifted as the plane climbed above the storm. Ethan didn't realize he was being interviewed. He spoke about rebuilding his life after his wife passed 2 years earlier. About freelancing from hospital waiting rooms. About coding at 2 a.m., because that's when toddlers finally sleep. He spoke about Lily like she was his greatest accomplishment. Because she was. He did not speak about the eviction notice sitting unopened in his backpack. Richard listened. Not politely, intently. By the time the plane began its descent into Seattle, Richard had made a decision. As passengers stood and reached for overhead bins, Richard handed Ethan a simple white card. No pressure, he said. But call that number before your interview tomorrow. Ethan glanced down. Langford Global Ventures. He almost laughed. Sure. And maybe Lily was secretly royalty. Still, he tucked it carefully into his wallet. Thank you, he said, unsure for what. When they landed, Richard's mother squeezed Ethan's hand. You reminded me of my husband, she said. He used to say kindness is the only investment that never fails. Ethan smiled politely. He'd heard nicer things before. They just hadn't paid rent. That night, in a budget motel outside Seattle, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed while Lily slept beside him. He stared at the card, then at his bank balance, then back at the card. He dialed. The call was answered on the first ring. Mr. Cole, said a calm female voice. We've been expecting you. The next morning, instead of taking a bus across town to a mid-level tech startup, Ethan found himself standing in a glass tower overlooking Elliott Bay. Langford Global Ventures occupied the top 15 floors. Richard met him in a conference room lined with windows. No formal interview, Richard said. I've read your GitHub. I've reviewed your open-source contributions. You solve problems most engineers don't even notice. Ethan's throat went dry. You looked me up. On the plane, Richard replied calmly. I invest in potential. Ethan nodded slowly. And what exactly are you offering? A lead systems architect position. Full benefits, flexible schedule, remote work options. He paused. And a signing bonus large enough to eliminate any immediate stressors. Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't real. Why? He finally asked. Richard leaned back. Because character is harder to find than talent, he said. And yesterday, when no one was looking, you showed me yours. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. He thought about the emergency room, the eviction notice, the middle seat. He thought about giving up a chair because someone else looked tired. He thought about how close he'd been to not doing it. I just didn't want her to fall, he said quietly. Richard smiled faintly. Exactly. 3 months later, Ethan moved into a small house with a backyard big enough for Lily to chase fireflies. 6 months later, he led a team developing infrastructure tools that saved Langford's portfolio companies millions. But that wasn't the moment that mattered most. The moment that mattered came on a different flight. Same kind of gate. Same kind of crowd. Lily, healthier, louder, unstoppable, sat beside him with a juice box. Across from them stood a young man in worn-out sneakers, holding a baby and scanning the room for a seat. Without thinking, Ethan stood. Hey, he said with a warm smile. Take ours. The man hesitated. It's okay, Ethan assured him. I've got this. Lily looked up at him. Daddy, where are we going to sit? He crouched to her level. Sometimes, he said gently, we stand so someone else doesn't have to. Across the terminal, unnoticed by Ethan, Richard Langford watched from a distance. He didn't approach this time. He didn't need to. Because the return on his investment wasn't in quarterly earnings. It was in the ripple effect. In the quiet passing of kindness from one tired parent to another. In a world that often moved too fast to notice goodness. One simple choice had changed a life. Not because a billionaire intervened, but because a single dad, exhausted and nearly broke, chose to stand.